a special invite.
role of independent community media in strengthening South African democracy. My name is Kobus Louwrens, and alongside my Food for Mzansi co-founder and co-host Ivor Price, we're thrilled to host this important discussion as a pre-event to African Media Perspectives conference that's happening later this month.
Yeah, thank you, Kobus. We're also the co-founders of the app conference, something we started last year for our sins, and it's now booming into quite an event, bringing together some of the coolest and the brightest minds in media, independent media from across the African continent, and as far afield as India, a couple of people coming from the UK this month. Of course, it's being held in Stellenbosch in a few weeks' time, and it will be our second annual AMP conference.
Yeah, we're glad to have this event as a pre-event because I think independent community media plays a crucial role in our democratic society. AMP is a 2-day event, so having a webinar to extend the program that's already jam-packed is great. And also on a day like today, the day after our election results were announced. So we know that community media provides a valuable platform for diverse voices, particularly those from marginalized and underserved communities. So it's an important channel, I think, for people for participation in the democratic process.
And it's not just a South African thing, although our focus today will be on South Africa. It's probably the world's biggest election year. Just about every second nation is going to the ballots this year. But in South Africa, the vibrancy of our democracy is deeply intertwined with the strength and the independence of our media. And community media outlets specifically not only inform and educate, but also empower citizens to participate in actively shaping their future and the democracy. They are the guardians of local stories and issues, often overlooked by mainstream media, but pretty essential to a comprehensive democratic discourse.
We're looking forward to a lively discussion exploring the unique challenges and opportunities faced by independent community media in South Africa. We hope to delve into how these entities contribute to the democratic process, their role also in promoting media literacy, and the strategies they employ to maintain the editorial independence and financial sustainability.
So enough about us yapping. We are honored to have an esteemed panel of experts. You can see them on the screen, who will share their insights, their experiences, and they will help us understand the current landscape and envision a future where community media continues to thrive. Not all of them thriving, but we want them to thrive and to empower our democracy. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Kate Skinner. She's the Executive Director of the Association of Independent Publishers, AIP. Kate, it's winter. Welcome. Nice having you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Slindile Khanyile is a community journalist, entrepreneur, a driving force behind 2 isiZulu language community media products. Always great chatting to you, Slee.
Hi, thank you.
And then, of course, Wazi Tusini. She leads little introduction in South African media, but she's the new program director for Amplify South Africa, and I think she'll share some of the details today. It's backed by the Media Development Investment Fund, or as we just say, the MDIF. Great having you, Nolwazi.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Ivor and Kobus, and thank you for hosting this important conversation.
And welcome to all our participants. We encourage you to raise hands. We want a lively and interactive session. If you've got questions, type them in the chat, and we'll direct them to our panel as we go along. So let's jump in. Kate, I want to start with you. Could you give us a brief overview of the state of play in the independent community media sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think it's a really interesting one because I'm from the Association of Independent Publishers, and we basically we publish more of the small publications around the country. Most of these small independent publications are AIP members. In fact, the numbers are pretty huge. And I just want to share a few numbers with people, because I think sometimes there's a sense of, we're marginal, we're small, or whatever. And actually, we're not that marginal and we're not that small. So, for instance, we've got 178 publications around the country. We have 147 publishers, which means that, some of our publishers are publishing more than one publication. And if you look at the monthly print run, which is not always stable, but it's big. It's 2.5 million print run. And I just want people to kind of like absorb that. And also to say that the monthly readership then at an average, at like quite a conservative estimate, is about 7.4 million. Now, this looks great, and people would say, well, wow, that's really huge. But I think it's also important to say that if you look back, and we keep on doing this, if you look back at 2016, in fact, we had 14 million, readership. So we've actually had quite a huge dip. COVID has had a really bad impact on us. So the issue is we're there, we're super important, but the situation is precarious in terms of numbers of publications closing and printing less. Also in terms of going online, it's a pretty tricky process going online. Let me leave it there, but I think this is just a sector we really got to engage with. Thanks.
I see people are joining us from as far as Liberia and West Africa. Welcome. And people will trickle in. Of course, the beauty of digital conversations these days is that this is live now, but it will live for quite some time, and hopefully reach as many people as possible. Thanks for setting the scene, Kate. Slindile, what does community media mean for you as the publisher of 2 community business digital publications? And both Kobus and I, we actually met as journalists at the Media 24 group, and we spent some time after the mainstream stuff working at community media, different parts of the country. And there's definitely learnings from community media that we've implemented at the Food for Mzansi group today as a community of interest. But what does community media mean to you when you hear that?
So Ivor, for me, I think it really means being niche. So that could be in relation to the geographical location of your target audience, or it could be in relation to, the topic or the issue that you choose to cover, as is the case with us, where, we have a community in the business sector as well as a community in the education sector with both our publications. And just like you guys at Food for Mzansi, your community is mainly the agri sector, for example. So, of course, historically, community media has, been known to be, publications or media houses that focus on just a particular area or serve a particular community geographically. But, with everything else that has changed, especially also as a result of digital in our industry and just globally, things have shifted a bit from just narrowing it down to a community, physically or geographically.
Yeah, it definitely shares a border with niche. It runs up against niche and community. Nolwazi, I'd love to hear your perspective on the community media business models. Are you at all concerned about the sustainability of community media, independent media, and the sustainability of its role in democracy?
Absolutely, Kobus. I think some of what Kate spoke to, Dr. Skinner spoke to in her response is an indication of that, in terms of just the breadth of the kind of information and coverage we were getting from community media before, as early as 10 years ago, compared to what we've been able to get from that particular media sector in the past 2 or 3 years. And I think that there are a number of issues that impact community media and bigger media organizations as well, those we would consider mainstream media. But the challenge with community media and the business models is that they had a little bit less resilience built into the models. I think that what we've seen with the advent of COVID and really what can be called a digital revolution in the past 10, 15 years is that the media globally, specifically on the continent and in South Africa, was not prepared to deal with those two eventualities and played catch up. And for smaller media organizations such as independent community media, the lack of preparation on that means that they were a little bit more susceptible to the issues that were brought by COVID-19 and by the digital revolution.
So how concerned are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And maybe just to put everybody on the spot, Kate and Slee, how concerned are you about the sustainability of independent community media?
Do you want Kate to go first? I think that I am concerned. If I wasn't, the Amplify South Africa program wouldn't exist. So there is a level of concern there, but I don't think that the situation is despondent, you know. I think it's urgent. I don't quite know that we've reached, you know, absolute crisis levels, but it absolutely requires urgent attention, innovation, imagination from the independent media sector and organizations such as MDIF who exist to support media in the public interest. Definitely, it's an urgent thing that we're wanting to work on and in partnership with independent media to try and resolve.
Kate?
So I'd love to jump in there. So, I mean, I think Nolwazi's put it really well. You know, the issue is that it is very urgent. It is very, very urgent. But that's not to say, oh, you know, this despondent, you know, it's kind of too far gone. I mean, I think it's very important to say that is not the case. But I mean, for instance, we've got a lot of amazing publications that have been publishing for a very long time. And they are finally getting to the point where they are like, wow, it is so hard out there that we are beginning to consider closing, which I think would be utterly devastating. You know, and also for new publications coming online, they're saying, wow, that environment out there is so tough that maybe we are thinking of doing something different, not you know, like investing in media or putting that kind of time and capacity in. And hence the need for kind of programs like such as Nolwazi's program and others, and money coming into the sector and some very creative thinking. You know, so yeah, let me leave it there.
Slindile?
Yeah, I share the sentiments of both speakers, but I also think that we have to have some really uncomfortable conversations as well, just as a sector. It's something that generally, and as someone who also comes from large media organizations, we generally are slow to change. Just generally, as journalists, we resist change. Well, it's human nature, but I think it's worse with us because, you know, when we are set in our ways, that's really what we'd like to do. But one of the things, for example, when I say that we have to have some uncomfortable conversations, I think we have to consider consolidation as a conversation, because as much as those numbers which Kate referred to earlier are great numbers, but, you know, they are numbers that exist in an economy that's growing at 1%. And we are not the only ones who are trying to fish in that pond, you know. Also, colleagues from large organizations are also trying to survive in the very same economy. And if you look at whether you're looking at 3-5 years, you know, the prospects of growth in our economy, it's still 1%, 1.2%. So effectively have an economy that's not going to grow for the next 3 to 5 years and hasn't been. So, you know, you can have all the support programs, but you need people to have disposable income. You need advertisers to be willing to advertise and all these other factors. And I'm not sure, how feasible it is, to try and be supporting about 150 publications, excluding large media organizations. So that is why I say, I think, obviously it's tricky because as independent publishers, we are entrepreneurs. So there are all those dynamics. And you also do not want to start creating what we refer to as media deserts, in certain areas, because once you talk consolidation, you probably will then have to start thinking, okay, where would we be best placed centrally? And obviously there are then certain communities that you probably have to leave out. And you then, I guess, start having problems of not everyone having access to, to news, to credible news, because, we all have access to a whole host of information, but it's not necessarily credible. So yeah, I think that it's a much larger conversation and uncomfortable conversation.
So many important points already being raised. Jeff, tuning in all the way from Liberia, you were right. The chat can't be enabled right here on the Zoom, but there is an option called Q&A. And I want to encourage everyone who wants to interact with us to use the Q&A function here on Zoom. You're also welcome to type it up on wherever you're watching, if it's on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever. Put it in the comments or just use the Q&A here and tell us where you're from. Kobus?
Yes, I just want to stay on the business model topic just for one more question. Asking Slindile, you're publishing digitally, exclusively digitally. Do you feel you're at all in a better position than your print counterparts? Is digital an advantage or a disadvantage in community media?
So I think that it is an opportunity, but as much as it is an opportunity, it is also a threat. Though I lean more obviously to the former, and this is because were it not for technology enabling us, we would not exist, because both our publications were launched in 2020. And the business publication specifically, it was right at the height of the pandemic. And there's no way that without, digital tools, we would have been able to launch. So I think that it is very important for what it does in terms of lowering the barriers of entry and creating access, because you need access first before you can start talking about sustainability as well. So in that regard, it's important, but it is a very difficult environment. And it is a huge threat, I think, to the sustainability of our industry, especially in a country like ours. And probably this applies to the rest of the continent if you look at the socioeconomic dynamics, because then, access to the digital platforms that we publish on, it is expensive because of data is expensive in our country, but you also have infrastructure issues. So connectivity is poor in certain areas. We have, as a business, concluded that we do need to consider expanding with a print product for one of our publications, because we can see, and when we speak to people, we are not reaching the number of people that we would like to reach as much as we are online. For our brand presence, it online alone for the market that we are writing for, it doesn't work. It would work. Of course, it works for other people, I think. So I think it also depends on who you are trying to target. That is also a big factor.
Mzansi, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump into kind of affirm what Slindile is saying around the move to digital. I think that a lot of independent media assumed that shifting to digital would be the way to kind of revive or save their publications or make them a little bit more sustainable. And I think that some of the issues that Slindile has spoken around access, infrastructure, and those challenges is important. And I think it's important because when we speak about business models, I think a lot of people don't realize that re-looking strategically at your business model means also re-looking strategically at your editorial offering and what it is that you're offering in terms of content. Yeah. And so content that is editorially strong and good for a print publication will not necessarily translate well into the digital space and vice versa. And so the idea is, if you begin to consider different platforms on which to publish, you can't just repurpose the same kind of content. You need to create content that is native to the specific platform that you're wanting to use, be it a digital platform or ordinary print and whatnot. And I think a lot of independent media, in thinking through sustainability and rethinking their business models, are not taking the time to look at their editorial offerings and realizing that there needs to be a bit of a shift there as well, because the business model is also influenced by the product that people are buying. And so the product needs to evolve in order to meet the current moment. And I don't think that a lot of independent media publications are thinking about that aspect of rethinking business models and sustainability.
Let's hear what Kate has to say, and then we'll go to one of the audience members, Simon Buleka, whose hand is up and wants to interact on this topic. And Kate?
I'm so glad that Simon's hand is up, because Simon is one of our very important AIP members. So great. So just to say that what I think has been very interesting, being part of AIP, is just the incredible importance of print. Print continues to be incredibly important, and often, a lot of people are very excited about change and innovation. They're like, no, you know what, print is, it's for the Luddites, it's whatever. It is not. In fact, still a lot of money can be made, with print products. And so what we are finding more and more is exactly what Louwrens was sort of saying around, you need to be multi-platform. You will get funding from different platforms. Obviously, you've got to adapt your content for that. But I think that we cannot, for the next couple of decades, maybe forever, probably forever, we are going to need print. And I think we mustn't forget that. Thanks.
And it's so important in a country like South Africa, where digitalization is happening fast, but it's not reaching everywhere yet. And we often get to places where they've either never physically touched a newspaper and now digital, or where they just don't have the broadband access to do 3G on their phones. Simon, you've got a question or comment? Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Simon, talking permitted, it shows, and hopefully you can go. We're ready for you. I think Simon dropped off. Can we focus the conversation slightly away from business models to democracy? And I'm wondering how independent community media contributes to democratic processes, particularly in marginalized and underserved communities in South Africa. Kate, can you perhaps share specific examples where community media has successfully influenced local or national policy changes?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, because I think that I want to use a couple of concrete examples from our members. And so I'm kind of looking a little bit back. We had a chairperson, Tom Nkosi, and he had this very important publication, Ziwapi. And he did incredible investigative journalism work in Mpumalanga, at the time around Didi Mabuza, and looking at a whole lot of issues around corruption and mismanagement of funds, really kind of following those flows. And I think what's important to say is that eventually he actually had to stop. he was getting so little money from the municipalities in terms of advertising because of his critical stance that he actually stopped his publication. So I want to just make that point that it's very difficult to do this kind of investigative work, and yet our members still do it. And so two of our publications last year won the Nat Nakasa Courageous Journalism Awards, and we were really proud of them. It was Ground Up, and it was also Limpopo Mirror. And, you know, to just quickly give you an example of the work they were doing, they were looking at the lotto. They were looking at incredible corruption in the lotto, and they were very well placed to do that because a lot of the lotto projects are in rural areas. And some of our journalists from the mainstream do not go to rural areas and go and check out, is that beautiful community center being built or not? And our publications were very well placed to say, you know what, there is nothing there. That money, which is supposed to have been spent on this clinic, this school, this community center, was actually not built. And in fact, we're very proud of ourselves because what happened then was that huge change was made to the lotto. New people came in, and we think that going forward, the lotto is going to operate much more effectively and much more accountably. So let me leave it there, but I think we have done some phenomenal work and have actually got awards for the work that we've done in terms of policy change and investigative journalism. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I recently moved to a very small town, and I realized living here how essential, you know, an independent local journalist would be to just help us know who our councillors are, you know, having that feeling of having a trained journalist sit in on council meetings, that kind of thing, you know. I think we kind of, we think Facebook groups and all these things are valuable platforms for us to give our opinions, but on a local level, you really need someone with the skill of a trained journalist to be able to represent you in that manner. But Nolwazi, I want to move to you, sort of on that topic. How do you think community media organizations can foster greater audience engagement and participation in democratic processes?
Well, I think that community media organizations and outlets are often the closest to their communities, much closer than you know, any of the big players such as ENCA, SABC, etc., etc. I think that proximity to the audience is important and invaluable in terms of audience engagement. There are a number of ways, I mean, and tools that I can speak to, but I think that each community, depending on who that community is and what kind of information the outlet is providing, there would be different ways in which to engage those communities more closely. So for the likes of Inanda, it might be participating in community events that are being organized in that community, such as sporting events or meetings in the community halls, ensuring that they have a presence there. And in other communities that are perhaps a little bit more rural, there's the like of Likhotlas, and where particularly traditional leadership is quite strong. It would be important to engage with traditional leadership in particular kinds of ways. And so I think that the methodologies and whatnot are different depending on who the community is and who the news outlet is and what kind of information they're trying to get out to that community. Platforms such as WhatsApp as well work. We've seen a lot of misinformation and disinformation and fake news spread on the WhatsApp platform as well as the Facebook platform. But this also presents an opportunity to spread fact-checked and factual news from people within the community and who are trusted by the community, which would be often the journalists and players from the independent community stations or publications. So what I would encourage for independent media organizations, particularly those that served underserved communities, is to look at the community in which you exist, and how it is that news and information spreads within that community, and then to tap into those existing communication lines, be they the WhatsApp community group, for example, where I'm at, or the community hall meetings, even churches, you know, and religious institutions play important roles to a certain extent. And I think it's important to tap into those specific areas of discussion and discourse in communities in order to really get a sense of the pulse of the community and the issues that matter to them, so that you can ensure that your content speaks to that. I think part of what digital or new media has done is the democratization of knowledge. So we have never in the history of the world had such easy access to such a large volume of information. And that's a good thing. However, because many media outlets were unprepared, and countries to a certain extent, there hasn't been enough civic education and work by the media to help people wade through that information, help people be able to determine for themselves which of it is factual, which of it doesn't quite make sense. And for a long time, the media kind of mediated that role, and it's become increasingly difficult to do so. But I also think that it's important for especially community media, well, all media in general, but especially community media, to really focus their attentions on ensuring that they provide the facts of the matter, because trying to keep up with breaking news first in the kind of media ecosystem and information ecosystem we exist in today, I think is to be quite harsh, a waste of time. There will always be someone who gets to the story first, but there isn't necessarily, we've seen, someone who gets the facts of the stories right first. And I think that that is really an opportunity for independent community media to step in and step up for its constituents.
Let's go to West Africa. Jefferson Massa, your hand is up and we'd love to hear from you, Jefferson. Switch on your microphone.
Yeah, my mic is on now. Thank you so much. I'm Jefferson Massa. From Liberia, West Africa, like you said, and I also have extensive background in community radio management and community radio journalism capacity support. So in Liberia, I think what we have slightly different from that of South Africa, when we talk about community radio here in Liberia, when we talk about community media, we talk about radio, because unlike South Africa, where maybe you have community publication, so our community media sector is only radio, because we have, in terms of low level of literacy, so community radio, the major vehicle for the dissemination of information, especially outside of the capital. And in our context of community radio, we consider it to be radio that should be owned, radio that should be programmed, radio that should be managed by the community itself. So each community radio is unique to the particular community itself. So currently we have 63 community radio stations spread across the country. Some depending the demographic and the population. So in some region you have more community radio stations, in some areas you have less. And the issue about digital disruption has actually affected our community radio sector, especially when it comes to the economy, because social media are such. So what our project, I work for Internews, which is a USAID, that's a US media development NGO. So we have been working to drive sustainability around promoting revenue diversification at community radio station. That is ensuring that they have smaller businesses established outside the mainstream of their media outlet. For example, opening a restaurant, maybe a bookstore, or maybe engaging in vegetable production. That could help bring in additional income to these radio stations. And another approach of sustainability we've been also taking is the solarization of some of the radio stations, giving them solar power, which immensely reduce power consumption and daily spending on the operation of these radio stations. So yes, community radio actually from our setting here is a very vibrant sector because the national media or the state-run media that's not covered across the country. So community radio comes in to fill in the gap, which is a very critical, tool in enhancing local development, mobilizing community to take civic action across Liberia. So I just thought to share my perspective and the issue about misinformation and disinformation, because most of these things happen online, but then they resonate in the community. So what we've also been doing is that to work with community radio, increase media literacy, not only just debunking, misinformation and disinformation, but increase community or local media literacy competency. So that helps to tackle rather than maybe overwhelming fact checkers that will supply, fact check information. But when people are able to identify it for themselves rather than telling them this it is, and it tried to help minimize the issue about misinformation and disinformation, especially during our just early election in 2023, where electoral misinformation and disinformation was at the core.
Thanks for joining us from Liberia, Jefferson. Kate, do you want to respond on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I think there were some very interesting points that were made there, which I think, what I love is just getting a sense of the fact that there are so many similarities, across the continent, and we don't actually have enough of these discussions. So the one point I want to pick up on, which I thought was important that Jefferson was making, was the ways to sustain yourself. And I think the thing is that when you're talking about our members, this is a very difficult environment to survive in. And so you need multiple funding streams. And so some of those funding streams might be alternative businesses that actually cross-subsidize. So you might actually have a farming business. You might have an events business. You might have a shop. You might have, and I think that we've got to be very aware of that. I mean, often, kind of purist media people working in the mainstream have a sense of, I'm a journalist and that's all I do and nothing else. And I think that as we move more into this new, very tricky environment, and particularly when we're talking about things from a global South perspective, we will find, and it's actually sometimes a really good thing, a creative thing, that our publishers will have these multiple funding streams and are super creative around this. So I thought that was a really important point. The other important point that I want to quickly touch on is the misinformation, disinformation. And I think, we've just come out of elections. It's really a problem, misinformation and disinformation. There's huge amounts of that at community level and everywhere. I mean, let's not say just that, it's across the country. And one of the most powerful things to do is local media being able to deal with that misinformation and disinformation. I'm just thinking about what Nolwazi was saying about WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp groups can be terrible. They can have the most awful information. I think about like family WhatsApp groups and things. And yet that is also a space which you can really decisively deal with misinformation and disinformation. And I really think that we need to be looking at local media and all of these different platforms in terms of that. Thanks.
Yeah, and on that topic, it's so important. We'll be covering both the elections in Africa across the globe, as well as misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes at the upcoming Africa Media Perspectives Conference. And Dr. Melin Kube, he's a postdoctoral research fellow at Stellenbosch University, will present a masterclass on how to spot a deep fake from a mile away. He will share some techniques to verify information, expose disinformation, and some strategies to become a fact-checking pro. Kobus?
Now, I think, unfortunately, our time is running out. I would have loved to spend at least another 30 minutes talking about this. Thanks for everybody for joining us. I think all three of our speakers on the webinar today is also speaking at AMP. Ivor, correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're 100% correct. You can go check out Africa Media Perspectives on LinkedIn. There are still some tickets available, and it's quite an impressive program. I'm looking at it now, from the likes of Khadija Patel, who needs little introduction, worked across the globe from Sky News to Al Jazeera. William Shoke, probably one of the shyest people, but most influential and important South African writers and scholars and journalists from Africa as a country is there. Dr. Claire Cook, in my mind, probably the leading experts on digital news and revenue as a researcher, at least. She's worked in 35 different countries studying she will be there. Demant Pareket, I must practice this before Demant comes to Stellenbosch. He's the co-founder of the Better India. They'll join us. Kate is there from the AIP. Nolwazi is there. And Nolwazi, you'll also be bringing along your new cohort, Amplify South Africa.
Yes, absolutely. We are excited to be part of the AMP lineup this year, and we are days away, Ivor and Kobus, from announcing the inaugural cohort of the Amplify South Africa program, who will be in Stellenbosch for AMP, and we'll also be having our first in-person meeting as the Amplify South Africa program. So busy time, but very exciting time for us.
Stephen says there on the Q&A, are there discount offers for independent media owners? It's awkward, Stephen, because the event is non-sponsored. We really tried our best, but the sponsors aren't there yet. It's literally a group of independent media people, some of them small, some of them in the game a bit longer, coming together. We've managed to bring the best speakers from across the globe, many of them paying for themselves to be there. So we're hoping that all independents will take some time off and consider it some training. There is nothing like it. You'll be filled in a room of greatness. I think it's worth the meal tickets at least for 2 days. And they can check out our website, Kobus. It's africamediaperspectives.com. It's being updated daily. Most of the speakers are there, as well as some information. And we'd love to see you there. So maybe in closing, just your closing shots. Let's do around Slindile, Nolwazi, and we'll end with Kate, and then Kobus.
Okay, thank you for the conversation. And I think that, it's important that we have more of it. And hopefully, as we engage more, we will find more solutions. And I think to really emphasize what Kate said in her last point about also diversifying. It is what everyone else in every other industry is also doing. It is something that we should seriously also look at. It's not easy. And as journalists, there are things which also sometimes become conflict of interest. So you can't just venture into anything, but it is something that we need to also think about. Thank you.
Should I go? So just to say that, I think everybody said all the important points, so there's not really much more to say, but other than I can't wait for this conference. I think it's going to be so exciting, and to have all of us together in a room is just, I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks, colleagues.
Great, that's it. See you hopefully at AMP South Africa. It's a 2-day conference. 24 and 25 June, or was it 23 and 24?
23 and 24.
23 and 24. It's the Saturday and the Sunday in Stellenbosch. It's on the campus at the university there. We'll be using the facilities there. There's an optional welcome function on the Friday evening. You're welcome to reach out to Kobus and myself. If you really can make your way there, but you can't afford a ticket, speak to us. Whisper in our ears, we'll see what we can do, because we really believe it's an important platform for important voices. Thank you.
Sorry, Nolwazi, we took the words out of your mouth. Okay, thank you. I just want to thank our speakers one last time for making the time. We organized this event in not a lot of time, so thanks for your availability. Thanks for your great participation, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys in person again at AMP.
Cheers.
Bye.
Following its debut last year, African Media Perspectives returns to Stellenbosch, South Africa from 21 to 23 June. This year, it's bigger and better, bringing together the brightest minds in African media for a weekend of thought-provoking discussions, invaluable workshops, and unforgettable connections. Tickets are now available on Quicket or visit amp2024.com for more information.